If the K9 had not reacted, no one would have noticed. That was the truth. The airport terminal was loud in the way only airports could be. Rolling suitcases rattling over tile, overhead announcements echoing without meaning, voices overlapping in a constant blur of movement and impatience. People hurried past one another, each trapped inside their own destination, their own urgency. No one was looking down. No one was listening closely. No one, except the dog. The German shepherd sat perfectly still beside his handler, posture flawless, leash loose, ears forward. His name was Ranger, retired K9, former police service dog, trained to detect danger long before it became visible. And right now, something felt wrong. Ranger's head turned slowly, deliberately, not toward noise, not toward motion, but toward something quieter, something fragile, a child. She stood alone near one of the support columns, small enough to disappear into the crowd if you didn't know how to look. Her jacket sleeves were too long for her arms. One shoe was scuffed and unlaced. Her hair was tangled, like it hadn't been brushed in days. She wasn't crying, that was what made it worse. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her shoulders hunched inward, her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides, as if she were trying to decide whether it was safe to exist in the space she occupied. Ranger felt it before he understood it. His breathing changed, his muscles tightened, and then, something no trained K9 was supposed to do, he stood up. His handler, Officer Daniel Cross, noticed immediately. "Ranger," he murmured, instinctively tightening the leash. "Sit." Ranger didn't respond. He wasn't disobeying. He was choosing. The child lifted her head just enough for her eyes to meet his. They were dark, too old for her face, carrying something that didn't belong to someone her size. She took one step back. Ranger took one step forward. The leash went taut. "Easy," Cross said under his breath. Retired or not, this was not acceptable behavior. Dogs weren't supposed to approach civilians unprompted, especially children. But Ranger's gaze never left her. The girl swallowed. And then, in a voice so quiet it barely existed, she whispered, "Who hurt you?" The words weren't meant for Ranger. They were meant for herself. But Ranger reacted like he'd been struck. His ears flattened. His body shifted instantly. Not aggressive, not defensive, protective. His head lowered to her height. His tail stilled. His eyes softened in a way Cross had never seen before, not even in the field. Everything around them seemed to pause. Ranger let out a low, broken sound. Not a growl, not a bark. A whine. Officer Cross felt his stomach drop. That sound meant something, and Ranger hadn't made it in years. Hook CTA, Inizio Monetizzato. Before we continue, if stories about loyalty, protection, and the unbreakable bond between humans and canines move you, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. These stories reach farther than you think. Back to the story. Cross stepped closer. "Sweetheart," he said gently, lowering his voice. "Are you here with someone?" The girl shook her head. Once, barely. Ranger sat down without command, directly in front of her, placing his body between her and the crowd. That's when Cross knew. This wasn't coincidence, this was instinct. This was training colliding with something deeper. And whatever this child was carrying, Ranger had recognized it instantly. People began to notice. A few slowed their steps. Someone whispered. A phone lifted briefly, then lowered again when they realized this wasn't something to film. The girl reached out slowly, hesitantly, stopping inches from Ranger's fur. She looked up at Cross, eyes searching. "Can I?" she asked. Cross hesitated, then nodded. Ranger leaned into her touch the moment her fingers brushed his neck. And that's when Cross saw it, the faint yellowing bruise along her wrist, the way she flinched when someone passed too close, the way Ranger positioned himself, blocking, anchoring, guarding. This dog wasn't reacting to fear. He was reacting to pain he recognized. Cross keyed his radio, voice calm but tight. "Dispatch, I need a welfare unit at Terminal B, now." Ranger never moved, and the child didn't pull away. She leaned into him like she'd been waiting for permission to exist safely. And somewhere deep inside Ranger, the part that never truly retired, a promise locked into place. He would not let her go. Ranger had stood beside bodies before. He had stood beside victims after car accidents, after domestic calls, after nights that ended in handcuffs and silence. He had been trained to recognize fear, adrenaline, aggression. He knew the sharp scent of danger, the way humans recognized smoke. But this was different. The fear clinging to the little girl wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. It didn't smell like panic or chaos. It smelled like something that had been learned, something that had settled into her bones. Ranger stayed still, allowing her small fingers to curl into the thick fur along his neck. His body radiated calm, solid and unmoving, like an anchor dropped in the middle of a storm no one else could see. Officer Daniel Cross crouched slowly, careful not to startle either of them. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to Ranger. "Mila," she whispered. "How old are you, Mila?" She shrugged, the motion barely noticeable. "I think 7. Cross felt a tightening in his chest. Children didn't usually guess their age. "Are you traveling today?" Another pause. Mila shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm waiting." The word landed heavily. Cross followed her gaze. A row of plastic airport chairs sat nearby, empty. A discarded paper cup lay tipped on its side. No bags. No adults hovering nearby, pretending to check phones. No one waiting with her. "How long have you been here?" he asked. Mila's shoulders rose and fell. "A long time." Ranger shifted slightly, angling his body more firmly between her and the open terminal. His ears rotated independently, tracking movement around them. He wasn't tense, he was calculating. This was not disobedience. This was assessment. Cross reached for his radio again, but stopped when he noticed something else. Mila's sleeve slid back as she moved her hand. The bruise was clearer now, not fresh, yellowed at the edges, fading into green. Old enough to have healed partially, new enough to still ache. Ranger's nose dipped toward it instinctively. He inhaled once, then again. His jaw tightened. Cross had seen that reaction before. The subtle change in Ranger's posture when he detected narcotics or explosives. This was the same intensity, except now, the scent wasn't chemical, it was biological. Stress hormones, fear residue, pain, Ranger knew. A female officer approached slowly from the far end of the terminal, responding to Cross's call. Officer Lena Morales, Child Services Liaison, calm, experienced. She took in the scene in seconds. The child, the dog, the way Mila leaned into Ranger, as if gravity itself pulled her there. Morales lowered herself to Mila's level. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Lena." Mila didn't answer. Her fingers tightened in Ranger's fur. "That's okay," Morales said gently. "You don't have to talk right now." Ranger glanced briefly at Morales, then back to Mila. Approval granted. Conditional. Morales noticed the bruises too, and the way Mila flinched when a man walked past too quickly. This was not a lost child. This was a hidden one. "Ranger," Cross murmured quietly, testing the leash. Ranger didn't resist, but he didn't move either. He planted himself. Morales raised an eyebrow. "He's retired, right?" "Technically," Cross replied, "but he hasn't forgotten how to work." Morales nodded. "Looks like he's already working." Mila shifted closer to Ranger's chest, her forehead resting against him. "He smells safe," she said suddenly. The words stunned them both. "What do you mean?" Morales asked carefully. Mila shrugged again. "Some people smell angry. Some smell loud. He smells quiet." Cross swallowed. Ranger closed his eyes briefly, as if absorbing the weight of her trust. They moved slowly to a quieter corner near the family assistance office. Ranger walked beside Mila without pulling, matching her pace step for step. Anyone watching would have thought he belonged to her. In a way, he already did. Inside the small room, Morales offered juice and crackers. Mila accepted them without looking up, still seated close to Ranger's side. "Do you know who brought you here?" Morales asked gently. Mila hesitated, then nodded once. "Did they leave?" Another nod. "Did they tell you to wait?" Mila's fingers curled tighter. "Yes." "How long ago?" Mila looked at Ranger, then whispered, "Yesterday." The room went silent. Cross felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Did they say when they'd come back?" Morales asked. Mila shook her head. "They never do." Ranger's head snapped up, his ears pinned back. That sound, the soft crack in Mila's voice, triggered something deep inside him. Something old, something trained into muscle memory through years of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Cross had seen Ranger react to danger before, but he had never seen him react to abandonment. Ranger stood suddenly, stepping between Mila and the door, his body rigid, eyes locked. Morales followed his gaze. A man stood just outside the glass, watching, not approaching, waiting, and when their eyes met, he turned away. Cross's voice dropped. That him? Myla nodded. Ranger growled, low, controlled, warning. The sound echoed softly in the small room. This was no misunderstanding. This was no accident. And Ranger wasn't letting it end quietly. The man didn't run. That was the first thing Officer Cross noticed. People who knew they were guilty usually ran, or argued, or tried too hard to look innocent. This man did none of those things. He simply turned away from the glass and blended back into the flow of travelers like he had every right to be there. That frightened Cross more than panic ever could. "Stay with her," he whispered to Morales, already stepping toward the door. "Do not let her out of your sight." Morales nodded. "I won't." Ranger watched Cross leave, then looked back at Myla. His eyes softened again, his posture lowering slightly. The danger hadn't passed, but Myla was still his priority. Cross moved through the terminal with practiced calm, his eyes scanning faces, exits, reflections in glass. The man was good. He didn't look back. He didn't rush. He didn't draw attention. But Ranger had already done the hard part. He had identified the threat. Cross caught up just as the man slowed near a vending area. "Sir," Cross said evenly, "can I speak with you for a moment?" The man turned, surprised, but not enough. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Just routine," Cross replied. "Mind showing me some ID?" The man hesitated for half a second too long, then reached into his pocket. Back in the room, Myla sat silently, juice forgotten. Ranger's nose lifted, his body tensing again. He moved closer to the door, blocking it instinctively. Morales noticed. "What is it, boy?" Ranger didn't respond. He was listening. The man's voice drifted faintly through the glass. "Just helping her wait. Kids wander off sometimes." Ranger growled. Myla flinched. "That's him," she whispered again. "He never hurts me where people can see." Morales felt a chill. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Myla swallowed. "He says if I'm quiet, nothing bad happens." Ranger's growl deepened, vibrating through his chest. Morales reached for her radio. Cross studied the ID carefully. The name matched a real person. No warrants, no alerts, no criminal history. Too clean. "Where are you headed today?" Cross asked. "Nowhere," the man replied casually. "Just killing time." Cross nodded. "With a child who isn't yours?" The man shrugged. "She asked for help." Cross leaned in slightly. "Funny. She says you told her to wait." The man's smile tightened. "You know how kids are," he said lightly. "They imagine things." Cross stepped closer. "So do dogs," he said quietly. "But not like this." The man glanced past Cross, toward the room where Myla sat. That was the mistake. Ranger barked, loud, sharp, commanding. The sound cut through the terminal like a blade. Everyone stopped. The man's face drained of color. Cross didn't hesitate. "Sir, you're coming with me." "I haven't done anything." The man snapped, suddenly defensive. "Yet," Cross replied. In the room, Myla covered her ears as the sound echoed. Ranger immediately turned back to her, lowering his head, pressing his body against her side. "It's okay," Morales whispered. "You're safe." Myla nodded slowly. "He doesn't like when dogs bark," she whispered. "He says they see things." Ranger's ears flattened. He saw everything. In a secondary interview room, the man's story unraveled under pressure. Timelines didn't match. Details changed. His phone records showed repeated presence in the terminal over several days. Waiting, watching, choosing. Cross's jaw tightened. "This isn't the first time, is it?" he asked. The man didn't answer. Cross slid a photo across the table. Security footage showing Myla sitting alone, the man watching from a distance. "She didn't come with you," Cross said. "You followed her." Silence. Then the man whispered, "She needed someone." Cross stood. She needed protection. Back with Myla, Morales gently wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Ranger remained pressed against her, unmoving. "They're talking to him," Morales said softly. Myla nodded. "He always says talking makes things worse." Ranger exhaled slowly. Talking was over. Now came truth. The man's name was Evan Holt. At least, that's what the ID said. He sat across the table from Officer Cross with his hands folded neatly in his lap, posture calm, expression carefully neutral. He didn't look dangerous, that was the problem. Men like Evan never did. They blended in, learned routines, memorized places where people were too busy to notice children standing still for too long. Airports, bus stations, malls, places where waiting was normal. Cross had seen the pattern before. Now he was watching it unfold again. "You spend a lot of time here," Cross said evenly. scrolling through location data on the tablet, more than most travelers. Evan shrugged. I like people watching. Funny, Cross replied, because you don't like being watched. Evan's jaw tightened. Down the hall, a different conversation was happening. Mila sat curled on the couch, Ranger's head resting on her knee. His eyes were half closed, but his ears tracked every sound outside the room. He was calm now, but vigilant. Morales spoke gently, careful not to push. Do you remember how you got here, Mila? Mila nodded slowly. He brought me, she whispered. From where? Mila hesitated, then glanced at Ranger. He says I can say now, she murmured. Morales' heart skipped. He? Mila touched Ranger's head. He knows when it's safe. Morales nodded, swallowing. Okay, tell me what you remember. Mila spoke in fragments. A house with too many locks, windows covered, a rule about being quiet, a promise that things would be easier if she listened. She never said the word hurt. She didn't have to. Morales recognized the signs instantly. Coercion, grooming, control, and something else. He never hit me, Mila said quickly, as if afraid she'd said too much. He says that makes people notice. Morales closed her eyes for a moment. Ranger growled softly, almost imperceptibly. Across the table, Cross slid another photo toward Evan. Security footage from a bus terminal in another city. A child, different face, same posture, waiting. Evan's breath caught. That's not, he started. Her name was Lily, Cross said quietly. She disappeared 2 years ago. Silence filled the room. You didn't hurt her either, Cross continued. You just waited, watched, took advantage of the fact that no one else was paying attention. Evan's mask cracked. She needed me, he whispered. They all do, Cross stood. They need protection. When Cross returned to the room, Ranger lifted his head instantly. It's done, Cross said quietly to Morales. He's not leaving. Mila's shoulders sagged, relief flooding her face. Ranger exhaled deeply, the tension draining from his body like air from a valve. Mila pressed her forehead into his neck. He's gone, she whispered. Ranger licked her hair once. Promise kept. That night, Mila slept on a cot in a quiet room at the station. Ranger lay beside it, his body positioned so no one could approach without passing him first. Officers passed by, lowering their voices instinctively. No one questioned it. Some things didn't need permission. Cross stood in the hallway watching the two of them through the glass. That dog recognized her, Morales said softly beside him. Cross nodded. He recognized himself. Morales frowned slightly. Cross explained. Ranger spent years finding people who were scared but silent. He learned how pain hides. Morales looked back at Mila. And now? Cross's voice softened. Now he's home. The room where they met was too clean, too bright, too quiet. Mila sat in a chair that felt too big for her, feet swinging inches above the floor. Ranger lay beside her, his body angled just enough to keep contact with her leg. His breathing was slow, steady, deliberate. Across the table sat people who spoke softly, but carried heavy authority. A child services supervisor, a legal advisor, a departmental representative. Officer Cross stood near the door. This situation is complicated, the supervisor began, folding her hands. But our priority is the child's long-term safety. Mila nodded politely. Ranger didn't move. We can't allow an unassigned K-9 to remain with a civilian minor, the legal advisor continued, no matter the circumstances. Ranger's ears flicked. Mila's fingers tightened. But he's not hurting me, Mila said quickly. He stops the bad things. The supervisor smiled gently. We know, sweetheart, but we have rules. Ranger lifted his head. Rules had never saved anyone. Cross spoke up. With respect, this dog identified a predator none of us had flagged. He prevented further harm. That's not in dispute, the advisor replied. But emotional reliance can complicate recovery. Mila looked up. I'm not relying on him, she said quietly. I'm listening to him. The room fell silent. Ranger leaned into her leg. The decision came in measured words. Temporary separation, psychological evaluation, reassignment pending review. Mila didn't understand all of it. She understood the end. He has to go, she whispered. Ranger stood, not aggressively, not loudly. He simply placed himself directly in front of her chair, blocking, protecting, choosing. Officers shifted uncomfortably. He's reacting, the supervisor said. No, Cross corrected softly. He's responding. Ranger didn't bare his teeth, didn't growl. He lowered his head, placing it gently in Mila's lap. Mila wrapped her arms around him. He stays. she whispered, not as a demand, but as a truth. Outside the room, news vans waited. The story had leaked again, and this time the question wasn't about what the dog did, it was about what the system was doing now. That night, Mila cried for the first time since arriving. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears soaking into Ranger's fur as he lay beside her. "I don't want to be quiet anymore," she whispered. Ranger's tail tapped once. She wasn't alone now. By morning, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Veterans, therapists, former handlers, people who recognized what everyone else had missed. A retired K9 doesn't stop protecting. He just waits for someone worth protecting. The phones never stopped ringing. By mid-morning, the story was no longer local. Clips from the terminal replayed across national news. Social media filled with still frames of Mila holding onto Ranger, his body curved protectively around her like a living shield. But inside the child services building, none of that noise mattered. What mattered was the small interview room. Mila sat with her hands folded in her lap this time. Ranger was beside her, close but not touching. He had learned over years of discipline when to be present and when to step back. This was her moment. Across from her sat a trauma specialist and a recorder placed carefully on the table. "You don't have to answer anything you don't want to," the specialist said softly. "And you can stop at any time." Mila nodded. Ranger's ears lifted slightly. "Freddy, can you tell us what made you come to the airport?" the specialist asked. Mila swallowed. "He said it was safer," she whispered, "that people don't notice kids there." Her hands trembled. Ranger leaned closer. The specialist waited. "He told me to sit still, to wait, to not talk to anyone," Mila continued. "He said if I listened, I wouldn't get hurt." The word hurt hung in the air. Ranger's body stiffened. The specialist's voice remained calm. "And did he ever touch you?" Mila shook her head quickly. "No. He said touching makes people ask questions." Silence filled the room. The recorder continued to hum softly. Outside the room, Officer Cross listened through the glass. This wasn't just testimony. This was survival. Mila's voice grew steadier as she spoke. "He watches first. He waits until people stop paying attention. He smells angry all the time." She looked up suddenly. "But Ranger smelled it first," she said. "He knew before I did." Ranger turned his head toward her. She smiled at him just a little. "He didn't ask me to be quiet." When the interview ended, the specialist removed the recorder slowly. "You did very well," she said gently. Mila nodded. Ranger pressed his nose briefly against her knee, proud. The evaluation room was next. Ranger stood at the center, while two handlers observed his responses. Loud noises, sudden movement, separation cues. He passed every test, except one. When Mila was led out of the room, Ranger moved instantly, positioning himself between her and the exit. He did not bark. He did not resist. He simply refused to disengage. The handlers exchanged a glance. "That's not aggression," one of them said quietly. "That's attachment," the other nodded. "And it's stable." By late afternoon, the decision reached the top. Too many professionals agreed. Too many experts spoke up. Too much evidence existed. This was not dependency. This was regulation. A traumatized child and a trained K9 had formed a mutually stabilizing bond. Separating them would do harm. The supervisor entered the room where Mila waited. She knelt this time. "We're going to let Ranger stay with you," she said softly. "Under supervision. Permanently." Mila blinked. Once. Then her face crumpled. She didn't cry loudly. She buried her face into Ranger's fur and breathed. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was waiting anymore. Ranger sat tall beside her. Mission complete, or so it seemed. The house was quiet in a way Mila had never known before. Not the kind of quiet that meant being careful, not the kind that meant waiting, the good kind. Morning light slipped through the curtains and rested gently on the floor where Ranger lay stretched out, his body relaxed but alert, just enough to notice when Mila stirred in her sleep. He always noticed first. Mila padded into the living room, rubbing her eyes, her steps soft but confident now. She stopped when she saw him watching her, tail giving a slow, steady thump against the floor. "You're still here," she said, smiling. Ranger stood and walked over, pressing his head gently into her side. "Still here. Always." Life didn't magically become perfect. Mila still startled at sudden noises, still checked doors twice before bed, still carried memories she couldn't always explain. But now, when fear crept in, it didn't stay long. Ranger sensed it before it reached her chest. He would move closer, sit beside her, ground her in the present with his steady breathing and quiet presence. He never asked her to be quiet. He never asked her to wait. He simply stayed. At school, kids asked questions. Why does the dog come with you? Is he a police dog? Did he bite someone? Mila smiled softly. He listens, she said. Ranger lay beside her desk, eyes half closed, ears tuned to everything that mattered. Officer Cross visited sometimes. Each time he paused in the doorway and watched them together. You know, he said once, people keep asking how Ranger knew. Mila looked up from her book. Knew what? That you needed help. Mila thought for a moment. Because he's been hurt too, she said simply. And he didn't want me to learn how to be quiet like he did. Cross swallowed hard. Months passed. The case closed, the headlines faded. But Ranger's work didn't end. He wasn't guarding terminals anymore, wasn't tracking suspects. He was guarding something far more important, a childhood. One evening, Mila sat beside Ranger on the porch steps, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in soft orange light. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for not walking away," she whispered. Ranger closed his eyes. He hadn't been waiting for orders. He had been waiting for her. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that real protection doesn't come from rules. It comes from staying when it matters most. Tell us in the comments, do you believe animals can sense pain before humans do? Some heroes don't speak, they listen.